And if you saw the Times yesterday, there was a lead story on the left side in which they talked about new names for some diseases that have been called cancers. Take the word cancer out of the name, and it takes away some of the negative connotations. So words and Jackson's ability to create communication skills and communicate with the public was the conversation. John's beautiful paragraph, which is on the brochure, is really the driving force for this week. So I'm an organic chemist, and I had to think very hard about how I can connect with Jackson's words and Jackson's technology and Jackson's abilities and Jackson's writing skills. So here's a picture of Henry King. Henry was a Nuremberg prosecutor years ago. Henry was involved in the second Nuremberg trial, the Gerhard Milch trial. So here he is as a very older gentleman. Then the case was preserved a few years ago. So anyway, what are my objectives to talk when I talk today? Well, my first objective is to avoid castigation from the Jackson police. What do I mean by that? So I got to talk about Jackson, right? So I got to weave Jackson into organic chemistry, which isn't hard because Jackson wrote really the document that became the document for the sixth Nuremberg trial, which was the Farben trial. But I'm not going to talk much about Farben today. Instead, I'm going to talk about organic chemistry. I'm going to talk about something that John brought up yesterday, and that was a Jackson speech in 1941, in which he said that Jackson had guaranteed as Attorney General that Japanese Americans, that German Americans, that Italian Americans would be sort of left alone, is the way I heard what you said, in 1941. Of course, that was followed by the internment of the Japanese on the West Coast. What I'm going to talk a little bit about today is what happened with German Americans in the United States at that time during World War II. And so that's maybe will be sort of interesting to some of you here. I'm going to connect this all to Chautauqua Institution. And I'm going to connect it more, in my case, to Chautauqua County. My wife and I are natives of Chautauqua County. And we're going to connect Chautauqua County to this institution and to this story. And then perhaps I'm going to provide an unusual view of events in which Jackson played a central role in World War II America. Basically, what I'm going to try and do is talk about connections. And the connections at the time were titled Almar Schacht, who was a Nuremberg defendant, who was found not guilty, who was not convicted. John Vincent, who founded Chautauqua Institution, and the Harvard Chemistry Department. Now you'll see that this sort of translates slightly differently as time goes on, but nevertheless, that's the title that I wrote in about 2 months ago. And the story starts and ends with QUININE. I don't know if you've ever taken a blue lamp that you get, that's your, where's Greg? I was in the Bemis Point Inn the other day, and we were having breakfast, and Greg's car repair guy was in the Bemis Point Inn. And he was talking about some things about Greg's car that needed to be fixed. And I didn't think about it, or I would have gotten the lamp that car repair guys use to see if your radio is leaking, which is a UV lamp. And we'd have done this experiment here. What's the experiment? Well, it's Canada Dry on the left and Canada Dry on the right, with a blue light shining on the Canada Dry. Quinine fluorescence. So if you want to titrate the fluorescence with gin, go right ahead and you'll see how concentrated your solution is, that is to say how strong the drink is, by the amount of fluorescence that disappears in the process. So I'm going to talk about quinine. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what organic chemists do for a living. Basically what we do for a living is we learn from what God made, and then we ultimately try to make and improve God's products and make them more efficiently and cheaply. Now when does this become most important? Well, if you're used to using something and somebody takes it away, classic case was what happened in 1941 when the Japanese invaded all the islands where rubber trees were growing, right? What did we do in the United States? A crash program that was centered in Akron to produce synthetic rubber. By 1943, we were using synthetic rubber, not Buna S, which was what the Nazis and the Germans came up with, which was inferior, but synthetic rubber, which today is the rubber that's used in tires. So we were prevented from importing rubber, natural rubber, and in the process, it created an opportunity, and the opportunity to produce synthetic rubber, which became a major industry, still existed. So ultimately what we try and do is improve God's products if we can, but mainly make them cheaper and more efficiently. Now, if you're a professor in chemistry in a university, this is what people think of organic chemistry. And I can put a whole bunch of other things up there, but this is sort of the least of many different approaches. This is the pre-meds and pre-dents and pre-pharmacies and all sorts of other things take organic chemistry. And it's not their favorite class. So it's one of those things that you have to suffer with if you're an organic chemist. You don't suffer with it much, you let them suffer. But you see, it's a case that says that, this is not for everybody, but it is for some, and some great things that have come from it. So let's look at some things that have happened in the not too distant future that have sort of affected us. That have been organic chemists' contributions. And you can make this list 1,000 items long, but I just picked a few. If you haven't read the story of insulin, which is a University of Toronto, Western Ontario story, it's really worth reading. The discovery of insulin by a professor of history at the University of Toronto named Michael Bliss, in which he talks about how it was discovered that the pancreas was responsible for the insulin secretions that control sugar concentrations in people. 1920s. Antibiotics. Where did the antibiotics come from? Well, it turns out that 35% of the deaths in World War I weren't from injuries that were caused by bullets; they were from infections. And so there was no treatment for bacterial infections before Gerhard Nowak and Heinrich Caroline, who was later a Nuremberg defendant, found that the sulfa drugs could in fact control infections. So 1933, 1934. I like to put up here, I don't have it on this particular slide, but there's a Chautauqua County resident whose father was Surgeon General during the World War, from 1934 to 1946. His name was Tom Parent. He's been in the news recently because of cases that were involved with the injection of syphilis in people in Alabama, I believe. But in fact, Tom Parent was Surgeon General from 34 to 46. Through that connection, Eleanor Roosevelt, for her son Franklin, her oldest son Franklin, managed to get some German, what became eventually sulfanilamide, to treat a bacterial infection in 1936-37 to save the boy's life. Tom Parent himself had some sulfa that was given to his son Ted when he was seriously infected in 1939, and Ted told me this story himself about how his father managed to save his life because of what was now American. And then, of course, the marvelous story of penicillin, which has been told by a Chautauqua author in a book called A Fierce Radiance. Her name is Lauren Belfer. She wrote the book about buffalo. So, what was City of Light, I think was the name of that book. She also wrote a book about penicillin, which is absolutely excellent. It's a novel, so she can't be accused of making mistakes. But it turns out I can follow, because I know the penicillin story, a whole bunch of these people in the story, and it's really fun to see that story. But penicillin, by 1943, our soldiers would carry pellets of packets of penicillin. So if they were injured in the battlefield, they could treat that injury with penicillin. And then you could go on with other things, birth control, other things. Of course, then there's the negative. Atomic bomb, chemical weapons, biological weapons, and now cyber weapons, which scientists create too. So we're all sort of living with the results of these experiences of the war and these experiences of deprivation, I guess is what they say. So illness from battle leads to treatments for diseases, war leads to life-saving devices, and here's sort of the story: bacterial infections, not bullets. BASF produced the sulfa drugs, and Lauren Belfer's story, A Fierce Radiance. But science has no morals. Science is you discover it and you use it. It doesn't say what you use it for. So quinine cures malaria, mitigates leg cramps, but also causes abortions. And its supply was completely cut off by the Japanese in 1942. It comes from bark, silicon bark, and we lost that source. It was a Java tree, and we lost that source in 1942. Well, what do? You try to make it in the laboratory. Nitric acid, another example, is used to make dynamite, but it also is used used to make TNT and RDX. RDX, the most vigorous explosive that we know is a non-atomic explosive, synthesized at the University of Michigan in 1940 by a scientist there whose name was John Sheehan. And John Sheehan became very famous later, not because he made RDX for the government during World War II, but because he went to Merck and isolated streptomycin, and later at MIT was the first to synthesize penicillin. So who is John Sheehan? Did he make the bombs of World War II? Or did he make the penicillin that solved a whole bunch of life-threatening diseases? And from then on. So, I mean, the morals of the individual would start to play. I worked at Harvard with a student, James Bryant Conant. James Bryant Conant's vestiges are still finding their way into the ground in Washington, D.C., where we were still finding lewisite from World War I American University experiments that were done for chemical weapons reasons, and in the face of the you've perhaps read T.O. Emory's stories in the New York Times not too long ago about that. And then there's the ultimate case of the HCN as in Cyclone B. It's produced from sugar beets. So you take sugar beets and you get the sugar all out, and eventually you're left with something called amygdalin, and the amygdalin decomposes and you get HCN from it. And that's how the Germans in Dessau were able to make what became Cyclone B in World War II. So research scientists are great entrepreneurs, and I'm going to advertise a little bit. You got a problem, we'll solve it. You want to pay us ahead, that's fine, you pick your choice of what the dollars are. If we solve it for you, we'll charge you later, right? So that's the scientist research mantra. You got a problem, tell us about it, we'll try and solve it. And let me just give you one example that just came up. About 45% of the fatalities in battle come from blood loss. Blood loss. So, the soldier goes into battle, is seriously injured, and his life can be saved if he can stop the bleeding. But who's he there with? Well, he's there with privates and others that have no experience. So the military trains their young people, their beginning personnel in emergency medical treatment. And so what do you need if you've got somebody that has a traumatic bleeding incident? Well, you need something that will mimic that, so you can train that person with the mimic. Well, what kind of things did the military use? They used animal blood. So if you want to train somebody to experience what becomes an active event that is a traumatic event of bleeding, well, you use animal blood to mimic blood, human blood. Well, animal blood has all sorts of negatives. So how do you, what the military came to my company and asked was, can you make simulant for blood? Can you make a blood simulant that looks like blood, coagulates like blood, flows like blood, behaves like blood, but has no toxicity? And of course we did. If you want to buy it with the website, the product has just been introduced. But it was the Surgeon General's instigation that now says that EMTs in Jamestown and Westfield and Buffalo can be trained with this material that will help them be better in the service of mankind. So I want to take an unusual walk through these 150 years. I want to connect Jackson, at least the things that he did, to the presidential election in 1872, and specifically to Horace Greeley. Why am I interested in Horace Greeley? Well, he was one of the great communicators, right? He was crazy in the head, as John just pointed out, right? But he was one of the great communicators. And we'll tie Jackson and the Nuremberg trials, then to Horace Greeley, who has Chautauqua County roots, to the Department of Chemistry at Harvard, through our newfound friend, quinine. Now, here's what happened with quinine, and this has become a really interesting story. As a result of John's lecture, I got to thinking about this last night. So here's the importance of war. This is a picture from Life magazine in 1944. Robert Burns Woodward was a professor of chemistry at Harvard, but an iconic genius. He started at MIT in 1934, was thrown out because he didn't complete any of the assignments. So in 1935, he went back and completed 186 semester hours in 1 year, got his bachelor's degree. Think about that. got his back. The only thing he did not do well was physical activity. So he flunked physical education. But the other 180, or whatever we called it at that time, gym, I don't know what it was called. But the other 186 hours he took in one fell swoop, and then completed a PhD dissertation, so he got a PhD in 1937. So an iconically brilliant man. And he had the other trait of treating things and dealing with things chemically that people were interested in. So the synthesis of quinine had been a serious problem for years and years and years, maybe 200 years. We knew about quinine as a treatment for malaria a long, long time ago. And people had been trying to make it for about 100 years. So Woodward succeeded in making the synthesis with a young man who could not go in the laboratories of Harvard because his name was William von Agers-Nuremberg. William von Agers-Nuremberg eventually became a professor, first at Columbia, then at Yale, and finally at Harvard, as a professor of organic chemistry. And this young man was working at Columbia teaching as an instructor, and Woodward said, well, let's work on the synthesis. Here's the preparation. Here's how we're going to do it. Would you like to work on this? And Nuremberg said yes, but because there was lots of research going on that was associated with the war, mustard gas, atomic bomb, napalm, all that stuff was going on in the chemistry department at Harvard. Nuremberg, because he had German roots, couldn't continue his graduate study as a student at Harvard. So what happened was, Woodward was a friend of Edward Land's. Anybody ever heard of Land before? Well, he's the guy that invented the Polaroid camera. And he had a small business in Cambridge, which was called the Polaroid lens factory. They made lenses, Polaroid lenses. Land says, you're a smart guy, I'll fund that, because if we make quinine, we'll sell it for the treatment of malaria if we make it commercially available to sell it. And we'll be able to sell it for the treatment of malaria in whatever application is possible. We'll make some money from it. So Land took Nuremberg, who could not work in the laboratories at Harvard because he was not German. His mother was German, but he was not German. Could not work in the laboratories at Harvard. Took him to the Polaroid's facilities, a warehouse in Cambridge, and that's where Woodward and William von Agers-Nuremberg synthesized quinine. Now, this is a picture from the Life magazine story. Can you imagine an organic chemistry story getting 8 pages in Life magazine? Woodward wasn't dumb. He it turned out the guy that he went out and found to do the story, and then turned around and started a magazine of his own called Scientific American, which still exists. And so out of this came a very long story that made Woodward's career. Now, he was really smart because he was an iconic genius, as I said, MIT 1934, escalated because he couldn't do anything. PhD by 1937, became a Harvard Junior Fellow in 1937, National Medal of Science in 64, Nobel Prize 65, Little one, another one in 1981, except he died because he didn't take care of physical education. Attack classic problems. Here's some of that's not untrue. He also smoked a lot, he drank a lot, and so by the time he was 60, he would have dead. But he was a smart guy, I guess. And some of the things he attacked, some of the things he synthesized. Well, quinine was the first, but then there was chlorophyll, vitamin B12, strychnine, lysergic acid, all these things you've heard of before. And colchicine to treat gout. So these are problems that were on the table for generations, and he solved them. Now, David Brooks said here, not too long ago, the message is the person, when reflecting on his teaching experience at Yale this semester. A very exquisitely thoughtful lecture. I don't know how many of you heard it, but just a very thoughtful lecture. So how did the works of the human or humanity define the person? And this is sort of the story that I told about Sheila. Hundreds of chemists in the U.S. were engaged by the National Defense Research Council. And this is the guy that synthesized RDX and made it a commercial material, but he also synthesized penicillin. During the war, when and where did personal acts take on a more political message? I happen to know this daughter and son-in-law of a British chemist who made a material that was very similar to sarin in their laboratories in Cambridge in the 40s. And I said to this young man, I'm so young, he's in his 80s now, when I met with him in London not too long ago, just how is it that you and your father-in-law worked on this terrible stuff, sarin, for its analog, fluorophosphonates. He said, my home was bombed out 4 times when I was a boy. I had no compulsion at all about working in anything that would help me save and defend my property. So, I mean, that was the situation in the United States. Well, let's disconnect to Chautauqua. Let's take a look at Chautauqua. Now, if you ever want to be an entrepreneur, here's an entrepreneur. This guy was one of the most widely traveled entrepreneurs in the Methodist Church. Got his degree at Lewisburg Seminary, in whatever year it was, I've forgotten, and became a Methodist preacher, itinerant preacher. And one of the places he ended up in 1859 was in GREELEY, Illinois. Think about that, GREELEY, Illinois. I'm going to connect with that later on. And then in about 1870, he ended up in Akron. He met this guy Miller, and he decided being Kyle Vincent, that he wanted to get Sunday school teachers more educated. So he brought them to this really bucolic place on it was called Fairpoint here, and brought these Sunday school teachers here, had them in a cocoon, and taught them how to teach Sunday school. Became the Chautauqua Assembly. So 1918, 73 goes, 1874, he says, I got to make this place famous. You know, he's an entrepreneur. How am I going to make this place become really a place that people can know about? Well, we got to get a famous person to come to Chautauqua. He tried to get Henry Ward Beecher. Henry Ward Beecher didn't come, but he knew because in Galena, Illinois, Hiram Grant was one of his parishioners. And he had his son who'd come back from West Point, who was working in his leather factory, leather store, whatever, that was U.S. Grant. He said he knew U.S. Grant because his father used to be one of his parishioners. So he found one of his associates by the name of T.H. Flood, in the place where I found this. There was a story in the Chautauqua Daily not too long ago about this particular event. But he found that sent Flood to New Jersey, which is where Grant's summer home was, with a letter from Vincent. Vincent's messenger presented the letter to Grant. Grant said, sure, I'll come. And Grant came in August of 1873 by a steamer on the lake from Jamestown, because this was a man, now here's the irony, right? Coming to Chautauqua, which had religious purposes and religious intention, and of course the Civil War. Grant, 750,000 dead, we don't know the number. And then he comes to Chautauqua as the U.S. president. Now, there was in New York State at this time, it never happens in Ohio, but in New York State there was this battle between politicians at the highest levels. Those two politicians were Reuben Fenton, who had a Jamestown history, has a Jamestown history, who was governor from 1864 to 1869, senator from 1865 to 1869 to 1875, and a liberal Republican. So there were two political parties at this time, Republican and Liberal Party. There was a Democrat too, but they didn't really fold into this much. And the Liberal Republican convention in Cincinnati in 1872 took a friend of Fenton's and pushed him to become a presidential candidate, and that presidential candidate was Forrest Greeley. Now, from what I've read about Fenton, he could walk on water. One of the things that I read historically was he could walk in the rain and not get wet. People really liked Fenton. And another politico at this time was a man named ROSCOE. CONKLING didn't have the same reputation as did Fenton. Here's what James G. Blaine said about him in the House in 1866. Haughty disdain, grandiloquent swell, his majestic supereminent, overpowered turkey dog or strut, and it went on from there. So, if you want to read about these guys, here's some websites. I think there's a print with these websites on them. So, Fenton and CONKLING, Fenton, sweetheart of the man, CONKLING in first place, first class ass. Here's another statement about CONKLING. Was created by nature for a great career that he wasted his talents entirely because of his own fault. Physically, he was handsome. Mental equipment nearly approached genius. His oratorial gifts were of the highest order. He was a debater of rare power, but his intolerable egotism deprived him of the vision necessary for supreme leadership. His wonderful gifts were wholly devoted to partisan discussions of local issues. Well, CONKLING became Grant's man in New York. And Grant's man in New York, Conkling, became the guy that had all the patronage jobs in New York. And the trade was going to be, after Grant served two terms as president, 1868, 72, 72, 76, he was going to take 4 years off, and Conkling was going to push it back into the presidency in 1880. Well, that sort of didn't work, but Conkling, you can't blame him for trying. Now, this guy was a real character. He was turned out and appointed as Chief Justice in 1873. He told Grant no. He nominated Grant for a third term, and he turned out an appointment as Chief Justice, and then he turned out an appointment as Justice Chester Allen Arthur in 1882, even after being confirmed by the Senate. So he was confirmed by the Senate and then said, no, sorry, I don't want to do this. And he became a very wealthy lawyer in New York, and died in 1885. So this is the first equal protection clause that I don't know anything about the law, but I found this 1886 Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific person as used in the equal protection clause applies to corporations as well as natural persons. I sort of think that's what Citizens United is about, but I'm not a lawyer. So here's Grant. Grant was a Westerner. Grant and Bishop. I told you this story. The T.H. Flood case. And you can read this in the Chautauqua Daily about a week ago when we had the website. And just ironically, this is the kind of thing connectors do. August 14th and 15th, 1875, Grant was here to make Vincent's dream become noticed in the national press. Exactly 61 years before Roosevelt's speech here, I hate war in 1936. Exact date, August 14, 1936. So sort of interesting connections. Now, what about Western New York at this time? Well, Western New York at this time was called the burned over region. Everybody that didn't have any value in the eastern part of New York State was sent to the western part. The total the population was 5 persons per acre, and that's how we became, Western New York became the home to diverse religious groups like the Mormons in Palmyra, the Spiritualists of Lilydale, and Harmonia in Kyneton. Harmonia in Kyneton was an organization that the Greeleys belonged to. This part of the country was church-centric, so Sunday schools, temperance, camp meetings, and church attendance. Well, that represents what we knew as kids in this area. Didn't go away as the century turned. 140 Years of Methodism, a book by a woman by the name of Helen Stonehenge, and there are copies at the Jackson Center, there's a copy in the back, has much interesting experience. Well, what happened with Grant in 1875? Well, he got he came and he said, but he refused to have lunch with Fenton. He said, Fenton did not support me in the election of 1872. I don't want anything to do with it. So you, Mr. Flood, Mr. Vincent, you go find a place where I can have lunch and not be around Fenton. Well, it's a long story in the Daily, but you can read it. And that place turned out to be the home of the banker, First National Bank President Alonzo Kent. And Alonzo Kent's house is now the Robert Jackson Center. And there's the room on the first floor, right in the middle as you walk in, which is the Grant room. And that's where Grant was entertained by Alonzo Kent. Grant over here, I guess, and Fenton down here. Fenton was allowed to come, but he had to sit at the other end of the table. And this is a picture from that same room in 2007. Senator Dale Connor and E. Barrett Prettyman Jr. with, at this time, just ironically, the then former president of Chautauqua's wife, this is Dan Bratton's wife, on the left, as Senator Dale Connor, Justice O'Connor visited the Jackson Center. So that's now the Grant room. I think you have some books in there talking about this event, the event of 1875. Now, what about Greeley? Why am I so interested in Greeley? Well, Greeley comes from my hometown, Clymer, right over there. He was born in New Hampshire. His parents moved to Clymer in 1825 about. And why did they move to Clymer? Because they'd been gone broke 3 times in New Hampshire. So, New Hampshire and Vermont. So, Greeley's parents were pretty bad farmers. So they tried to make it in 3 different farms, lost money, and then they went west. Right? It doesn't have anything to do with horse breeders. Go west, young man, but more or less that's what happened. So they moved from Rutland, Vermont to Clymer State Line Road over here in 1825. Now, Horace Greeley himself was still beginning his career. He was working for a printer in East Poultney, Vermont, but the printer went bankrupt in 1825. So Horace wanted to go see his mother, so he walked from Rutland, Vermont to QUININE, New York in 18. And this is part of biographies written about Greeley. Greeley had a biography written in 1857. He didn't die until 1872. Now try that. It's somebody read a biography of you 15 years before you die. And then you'll become an important anyway. So, but Greeley's first job he got here, he needed a job, so he liked to write. And so he got a job in Jamestown for a paper, which I don't know if it was the Jamestown Journal, but it was some paper in Jamestown. He worked for a week, wrote stories, and unfortunately they didn't pay him. So he quit. And he went east then to another job. Eventually his first job that became successful in this area was with the Erie Gazette. So the Erie Gazette, I think, still exists in Erie, Pennsylvania. And that was Greeley's first job in 1828 or so. Now, where did Greeley's parents move to? Well, let's give you a flavor. They moved to the corner of State Line Road and Cabbage Hill Road. State Line Road, Pennsylvania is on this side, New York is on this side. And if you want to, this is Erie County, Pennsylvania, and that's what it looks like today. Still a dirt road, still not occupied, and that's where the Greeleys went. That's where Zacchaeus and Mary Woodward Greeley migrated to in 1825. Now, how do we know this? Well, the biographers talk about conversations that were had with people in QUININE in that period. And here's a picture of actually the corner in which the Greeleys, and Greeley's father wanted to grow sheep, but the wolves were too thick, so the wolves would get his sheep. So he was there as a sheep farmer simply because the wolves in this area. And this is still really backward territory. You drive over there, you start up the hill from Clymer to Corey, and you go straight instead of going toward Corey, and that's where this road is. Now, just to give you a flavor, Greeley walked from Vermont to western New York. Now, why did he walk? Because the Erie Canal didn't start until 1831. So the only way to get here, you maybe couldn't afford a horse, the only way to get here was that way. Now, when he went back to New York, got to New York in New York City, then he was able to take the Erie Canal because it had been completed. But at this time, that's sort of, and this is sort of interesting. This is Zacchaeus Greeley was his father, Mary Woodward Greeley's his mother. This is their tombstone in the Clymer Cemetery. Pretty worn away, died December 18, 1866. Age, I can't read it, 85 years, so he was a tough guy. He lived 85 years in that time. That's Horace Greeley's father. Now, the connection I've not been able to make, because Greeley's libraries and stuff are in Chautauqua, New York, which is just north of New York City. And the Fenton Center in Jamestown doesn't have information on this, but the connection that I've not been able to make is printed connection between Greeley and Fenton. There's huge printed connection between Greeley and Lincoln. Because Greeley's biographers will point out they have some really interesting things to say about Greeley. Number one, his pleading for the North to go to attack the South in 1859, 1860, his pleading to drive the North into the Civil War was really what drove the government to begin the attacks that led to the Civil War. Of course, there was Fort Sumter in between, but the point was that Greeley was very warlike, thinking that the plantation owners wouldn't fight. Well, he was completely wrong, but nevertheless, it was one of his drives, and he was very strongly in favor of emancipation, free the slaves. So there are marvelous editorials to Lincoln and letters back from Lincoln about freeing the slaves. But his current biographers, Robert Williams and others, maintain that he also felt there should be justice for the freed slaves. So when you connect freedom to justice, what Bob Williams, who's written the most recent biography of Greeley that I've been able to find, says is that the connection of justice to freedom was something that Greeley pushed very hard for. And so he wasn't such a bad guy. I mean, he was very much involved in complaining about the Kansas-Nebraska Act and very much on Lincoln's case. And Jeter Isley, a professor at Princeton, who's written Greeley and the Republican Party, says these words: Greeley, more than any individual, misjudged the Southern plantation owner. Really felt that a challenge they wouldn't fight fight. His readings were unforgiving. Well, after the war, now think about this. You know, local newspaper editor runs for president. So he sort of got an advantage, right? He can campaign in his paper, and that's what Greeley did. So 1872, he's nominated by the liberal Republican Party to become the presidential candidate to run against the incumbent U.S. Grant. And of course, as he's campaigning, he writes editorials about grants being crooked, grants connected to CONKLING, and all this good stuff. And it was probably all true. But Grant prevailed substantially. He won big time. And if you then go ahead and read the Jamestown Journal about what happened after the election, so the question becomes, after the election, what do you do with this situation between the election and the electoral college election? And it turned out he really had the good sense to die. So he died, it was in December of 1872, so now all of his electoral votes, what do you do with them? Well, eventually they mostly went to Grant, but he's the only presidential candidate in history to have died before the electoral college. We heard about Gore versus Bush yesterday. Well, I don't know what the Supreme Court would have done with this if the guy did, but anyway. So, now Hunter Schacht. Hunter Schacht, get in the picture. Here's Hunter Schacht. He was Hitler's banker. He was a very effective banker. He stopped German reparation payments. He was an early Nazi supporter. He was an extremely good businessman. Schacht was Hallmark Horace Greeley von Schacht. Right? Why was he Horace Greeley von Schacht? Because his father, William, moved to the United States in 1870 or so. His mother, Constanza von Eggers, a Danish noblewoman, followed her husband to be in New York, and they were married in New York in January of 1872, the year of the election. Now William von Schacht, by the way, Schacht is the German pronunciation, Scott is the Dutch pronunciation. And so I tend, because I'm Dutch, to use Schacht. It's not right, it should be Schacht. But there's a very interesting story about Scheveningen and Scheveningen in Germany and Holland, and how they distinguished Germans from Dutch in the Netherlands in 1944. If they said Scheveningen, they were Germans. If they said Scheveningen, they were Dutch. But anyway, that's the Scott story. Anyway, his parents moved and were married in New York. His father was unable to make a living, so William Schacht couldn't make a living. Went back to Schleswig-Holstein, which is the province or the area right next to Denmark, became a teacher in 1878. Helmar was born. Helmar was going to be Horace Greeley von Schacht, but it turned out the Danish grandmother set her foot down. You've got to have a Danish name. So Helmar became Helmar Horace Greeley instead of Horace Greeley. So stuff you didn't really need to know, but not know that. Schacht was a really bright guy. He had a PhD in economics from Kiel, joined the Dresdner Bank as a press chief, and spent his entire career in banking. He became a major force in German banking in the 20s, and he presented various plans that the government managed to abandon the mark for new currency, negotiated with the British to set up bonds for purchase of gold-backed currencies. So the German companies, and this is a really important part of this economics, buy raw materials outside Germany, build them into manufactured products, and sell them back to the countries that sold them the raw materials as products, so you make money, right? So it's sort of like, yes, it's the Japanese idea, exactly. It's a no-brainer economics. The no-brainer economics sort of missed the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, because they felt that you could keep other people's products out with tariffs. So you block the German sale of products in the United States by having a high tariff, and therefore you can protect your business. Schacht said who just didn't pass. And he had the science and technology to back it up. So, in any event, he was aggressive about mediating reparations payments, stopped them altogether in 1934. Well, what went wrong? What went wrong in Germany was the U.S. stock market crashed. Banks demanded return of the borrowed margin dollars. So they borrowed that money to buy starting materials outside, and then, unfortunately, before they could sell the products back because of the depression, the banks wanted their money back. and then he simply transferred the depression from the United States to Europe, and the protectionist trade policy through the Smoot-Hawley Act in 1930, which, according even to Henry Ford, was economic stupidity, and so on. And we'll just not stop. But protectionist trade policies, Smoot-Hawley, impeded the flow of German imports into the United States, caused further unemployment in Germany, and made political slogans like Arbeit und Brot, work and bread, appeal to the masses. Mein Kampf, Hitler took over. Sort of a quick pathway through what happened in Germany. Schacht was one of them, the 23 persons who was tried in Nuremberg because of his involvement in the development of German economic policy. He was tried in the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg, and he was one of 3 who was found not guilty. So he never joined the Nazi Party and saw Hitler as a national unifying force. He was economic minister until the Nuremberg rallies of 1936, when he was replaced by Goering. Goering's economic policy was that he would build German products with German starting materials. German products with German starting materials. So benzene would come from coal, tires would come from coal. He didn't need the oil. He didn't need the saltpeter. He didn't need the potassium nitrate. He didn't need the rubber tree stuff. He'd make everything with the genius of the German science from coal. Now, he almost made it, but there's some other plans that sort of came in the way. And so, 1937, Hitler replaced Schacht with Goering. 4-year plans started. 4-year plans were the bringing of the people like Farben and Krupp and Flick and all of those industrialists to an economic conversation in which the government paid the industry to develop products that would be used in war. That's basically what changed. And out of that came World War II. Now, Schacht's position at this stage, he was replaced by Goering. He basically became a minister with a portfolio that was involved in some way in the assassination attempt in 1944. And as a result, was essentially out of government from 1937 on. Now, Schacht at Nuremberg. In October 24th, I think it was, 2001, I saw a little note in the Jamestown Post-Journal which said, Robert H. Jackson, Senator, post-Nuremberg prosecutors, something like that. It was about this long, and just a real little, and there was the name Greg Peterson associated with it. So I called Greg Peterson on the phone. I said, "What is this?" He said, "Well, it cost you $50, or was it 60? $60 per person."
It was 60, but you wanted to give me 50.
Yeah, I talked about it, $10. Anyway, so Sue and I, just right after September 11th, sort of a traumatic time in the United States, so Sue and I took a day off. I was still teaching school, and we came here. We have a home in Beavis Point. Went to this place. I had to call when we were driving. Where is this Jackson Center? Where is this place? So I talked to the secretary, and they directed me to the corner of 4th and, what is it, 4th and
Prendergast.
Prendergast. So, and walked in, and here was Whitney Harris, Henry King, Bernard Meltzer, another man with him,
Conway.
sitting with Greg and John Barrett. John, you were involved, weren't you, at this time? Talking about their experiences at the Nuremberg trials. And though I'd written a term paper on Farben in 1958 or 1959, that was my last encounter with Nuremberg in the subsequent trials. But I heard from these guys about the International Military Tribunal, Whitney Harris, and it was absolutely fascinating experience. I'm sure if you go to the Jackson Center's YouTube and archive, you'll find these interviews with Whitney Harris and Henry King about their experiences at Nuremberg. The youngest attorney in the cadre of attorneys that Jackson had available to him in 1945-46 was a young man with a degree, I think, from Harvard, who was just getting his first job, Bernard Meltzer. And he was about 23 or 24, and he was in the Jackson cadre, and his job was to prosecute Schacht. And he said to us, and if you go back and review it, he said to us as a group, I was the prosecute's shocked, and I did the homework, and I knew instantaneously that Schock would be found innocent according to the rules of the London Agreement written in August of 1945, in which it said that people who were not in government, basically, people who were not in government before the attack on Poland were basically not culpable. That's my translation, probably wrong, but that's basically the way I translated it. Meltzer said, I was the youngest attorney in the staff, and I was not going to be the one that first tried to prosecute somebody and failed. So he turned the job back to Jackson and said, get somebody older. And they got Brady Bryson, who was 3 weeks older. And it was Brady Bryson that lost the case. Schock was found innocent on October or whatever, or in October of 1946. Not innocent, found not guilty. You need to watch these YouTube things. Greg's YouTubes are just marvelous and have the Schock on the stand with being examined by Jackson. And Brady Bryson's presentation. I think there are 3 or 4 of them. Original documents, original movies from the Nuremberg International Military Tribunal involving Schock. Anyway, after Schock was released in October of in the summer of 1946, he was immediately arrested by the Germans and spent several years in German jails. Eventually, after he was released from that incarceration, he became a consultant to King Farouk, the Shah of Iran, and whoever was the chancellor of whatever of Iraq. So he spent the rest of his life as a counselor in the Middle East, an economic counselor. Now his conversations, his strengths, his advocacies were, as all Germans wanted to do, pitch Versailles, German power through skill and intellect, German morality, a Christian nation, and an economic nation. Now how does this connect to QUININE? Well, William von Agers-Goering was Schock's nephew. William von Agers-Goering's mother was a Schock. William von Agers' mother was direct descendant of Constanza von Agers, who was Schock's mother. So, Goering, in his oral history, said he talks about Uncle Hjalmar, who he knew and he was very embarrassed by. But as a graduate student at Harvard in 1939, 1938, 1940, he was not allowed to participate in research that could, in fact, impinge on the war effort. Goering was, and there are oral histories on Goering because he became a professor at Harvard and before that at Yale, and an extremely important person. Harvard during the war, Conant was the president. Conant was my academic grandfather, but in the chemistry department, Louis Fieser was making napalm. Paul Bartlett was trying to destroy Westinghouse. That was my laboratory. Kistikowski was working on the bomb trigger for the Manhattan Project. And the visiting professor that Goering eventually finished his degree with was Reginald Vincent, who was always at the British Embassy trying to make sure the U.S. got in the war on the British side in 1941. So, and Woodward, who was just a junior fellow, couldn't take PhD students at this time. So that was the Goering situation. They finished his degree. QUININE, this is the story I told you before, and in 1944, with land support. Now, Land was a genius in this thing, too. Land was the guy whose daughter said when he visited the Grand Canyon in 1951, boy, I'd like to see that picture before I have to wait to send it in to somebody to get it developed. And Land, on the way driving back from Arizona to Boston, invented the Polaroid, became Polaroid film. So Land and Woodward were really good collaborators. Land dropped out of Harvard too. So Land, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, basically. Harvard dropouts, not Jobs, not. But anyway, Land and Woodward were close professional associates, and the total synthesis of QUININE is pretty chemists that might be in the room. There's QUININE. Why does it emit light? Because of the quinone nucleus. So if we want to talk about that, we can. And later the Polaroid, and out of that came a career. And I won't go bore you with that, but this is just basically the story of QUININE connecting to Schott, connecting to Greeley, connecting to Jackson. And I won't go on to the story to tell you about how Jackson did with Schott at Nuremberg. It wasn't one of his finest and John Merritt argued this, but anyway, that's sort of it wasn't one of his finest present activities, Jackson's activity. But nevertheless, then back to Western New York, John Hyle Vincent, and the connections that lead to what guys like me get interested in. Thank you very much. John.
Is there a way to teach a scientist to have a moral filter?
Yeah, that's, it's really at various levels and very difficult. Now, John Sheehan his father owned the Battle Creek newspaper, Battle Creek, Michigan newspaper. He went to the University of Michigan, he wanted to major in chemistry, worked with a group there that was extremely famous. And the U.S. government, I'm talking about Conant, Vannevar Bush, the National Defense Research Council, put requests for proposals out into the academic community which said, can you help us with the commercial synthesis of RDX? Now, here's this young guy, he's 20, 21, trying hard to learn a complicated discipline, right? The idea that this RDX may have a value, the idea that it may have a value that may not be good for things, he might have known. But he was working for somebody who was directing him as being directed by the government of the United States. Now, what could he have said? He could have said, no, I don't want to do it. And he'd have been out. Now, that being said, drugs for misuse, as in the organic chemists that are making the steroids that Brian Braun and John Peralta and others are accused of using, different matter. There, somebody is using their technical skills to for non-moral purposes. Now, I've had that same question asked in the same room of Oppenheimer's biographer. Asked the question, well, why did Oppenheimer develop the skills with his people to make the atomic bomb? Now, there are several assumptions in that question. One is that it was a no-brainer to make the atomic bomb, which it was absolutely not. Number two, we were living in a nation that was facing a hideous opponent. Number three, hidden in the background from that hideous opponent was a group of hideous opponents that the Hungarians that were associated with this knew about, and that was the Russian bear. And so, as B.C. Saunders' son-in-law told me in London a couple years ago, when you're faced with life and death decisions, what do you do? So the difference here is war versus illegal activity, or war versus non-moral activity. And with the situation, and this is a long answer, but it's a long answer that has to be pointed out. The situation in the United States is that the laboratories that are teaching organic chemistry at the graduate level are at least 60% foreign nationals. What happens with my students when they finish is that I give them a copy of the U.S. Constitution and they become American citizens. To my students, the Constitution is a really meaningful document. You heard Ruth Bader Ginsburg yesterday. And I've heard that from so many Supreme Court justices. But the kids who come to the United States get an education so that they can live the American dream, right? Well, then the question's even farther confused. But, you know, we all have that same problem. How do you make lawyers be honest, right? How do you make preachers not be Jimmy Swaggart? Is that the guy's name? You know, and we all have the same issue. It's just with, now in the Farman case, first place I think they were naive, but in the second place, they were trying to make money for their company. We were talking 15 minutes ago or an hour ago about a company I consulted for who announced this morning their profits for the second quarter of 2013. Their profits are such that their per share value is going up to 19 cents a share for the quarter. And it's now a $5 billion company, and when I knew it, it was 4 guys in the garage. Now, that's a wonderful American story, right?
Should have bought that stock.
They should have bought that stuff. I shouldn't have sold it. But yeah, question. Thank you.
For those of us who aren't familiar with the Nuremberg trial,
Yeah.
just a couple of questions. Was each defendant tried separately? And
Yeah.
was Jackson the prosecutor on each of those 21 or 22 cases? I think that would be helpful for some of us who really don't know enough about the Nuremberg.
John, you want to answer that, or I already know?
There were 2 phases. The first phase was international, 4 nations, U.S., Great Britain, USSR, and France. And that was Robert Jackson's phase. There was one and only one international trial. That was the 22 defendants, including Schacht and Goering, etc. That trial was 1945, 1946. Basically, the Cold War brought that international cooperation to an end. So the United States and Britain decided no more trials with the Russians. Thereafter, phase 2 was American-only trials. They still continued to hold them in Nuremberg because Nuremberg was in the U.S. occupation zone. And those were the 12 sort of sector trials of different actors, including the corrupt industrialists, the Nazi doctors, the Nazi lawyers and judges, the high command, the diplomatic corps, etc. And those trials were 1946 until 1949. Telford Taylor, who had been one of Jackson's deputies at the international